Hiya folks, welcome to Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. This is another test, or maybe not even another test, more like an analysis. Because when I was thinking about my minimalism series, I was being all retrospectful and thinking up a list of all the issues and the ways I would do it differently if I was starting again. And I realised that I kind of just made a couple of assumptions about what the cheapest way to house all of our people was, and I kind of just built the low quality rural flats based on the assumption that those would be the cheapest per housed citizen. I figured I might as well, check, right? Each of these buildings tells you how much each material is. You can get the value of each material, so we can calculate that, right? So in a natural progression from the complexity of the game, we moved to spreadsheets. So this is something I built probably 2 years ago now. It imports your save game, extracts all the buy and sell values from it, and makes that available for you to play with. And it's got a tab for adding in the costs of each building by material and calculating the total output of that. So I'm not going to go through that on the video. I already did it in a tab and I exported all that into a new tab so we can just look at the results straight away. There's some fairly predictable results. If you predicted that lower quality buildings would be significantly cheaper, then you're absolutely right. If you predicted that bigger buildings would be a bit cheaper than smaller buildings for the equivalent number of people, then you would also be absolutely right. We've got the material costs just to build it, and then we've got a separate value. This is the material costs plus foreign labour to cover all the work days required to build a building. And then on top of the kind of overall costs for each building, I've got a cost per flat. So obviously that's the straight division, right? 2 grand divided by 20 is 100 quid. This is how much it will cost you per person that you have given a flat. And I've gone through all of the 10 flats that are available without research. I didn't go beyond that because there's just so many buildings, and by the time you've got stuff researched, you shouldn't really need to worry about scrimping and saving. The proportions between the various buildings are the same for materials and for workers, so it's not really a huge difference to look at this one or this one. The cheapest one is still the low quality rural flats with 20, but there's actually 2 low quality rural flats with 20 flats, and this is the one on the right. I've separated them out by how many people they take, and whenever they have the same name and the same number of flats, I've said whether it's the one on the left or the one on the right. So the low quality rural flats with 20 people that's on the right is the cheapest per person. It's cheaper than the one on the left despite having the exact same quality. Not by much, but by a noticeable amount. It is significantly cheaper than the left-hand brick flats, which is the next cheaper. It's like less than half the price, and the most expensive is both the smallest and the highest quality. So if you want to go for full-on cost efficiency, this is your best bet. So there's a couple of caveats here. First caveat: prices in the game are not static, right? There's inflation, there's supply and demand. If you're playing in non-realistic mode, there's delivery costs that associated with that. You'll likely see that the exact costs here might not be what you get in your game. The prices that I based this off of are the default prices on the first day of a brand new game in 1960, but you should find that the proportions are fairly the same, right? So the cheapest flat will still be the cheapest, the most expensive will still be the most expensive, so this should still be useful information for you. Second caveat: the work days that I have calculated this off of are the entire sum total of all the work days required to finish the flat or the building. However, unless you're playing very suboptimally, all those work days will not actually be done by foreign labour. A bunch of them will be done by an excavator in the groundworks phase, where you don't need to have workers. The excavator can do all that on its own. I've not calculated that kind of intermediate step of But from what I can tell, it's probably going to be very similar. Like it's going to probably be like halfway in between for each of these, and the proportions are probably going to be very similar. I've never built a building that had a really surprisingly high or low level of excavator work needed to complete it, at least within the flats. If you do want to calculate that yourself, I'll upload this spreadsheet somewhere. You can. It will just. You just need to point it at your Steam thing and then refresh it a couple of times, and it'll pull in your save game and pull out the prices, and then you can go to building costs, and it'll use your actual prices from the game. And there's even the house costs one here, so you could adjust this work days. You could go into the game, place down one of the buildings, see how many work days the groundworks phase needs, and subtract that from the work days that's already in this file, and that'll give you an updated cost for that. I didn't want to go that deep into it. It's just too much work. And I'd rather be estimating over than under. Hopefully that was interesting for you all to see. Let me know if you've got any questions, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.